Hi guys, it's Caroline, and today I'm going to be talking about the worst book that I read each month. Now, this is kind of a downer video because obviously these are books that I did not enjoy. However, I'm going to be doing a companion video, which is the best book that I read every month this year. So without further ado, let's get right on into it. So first up in January, the worst book I read is Oligarchy by Scarlett Thomas. Now, I did not like this book at all. It's very short. It's about a girl who goes to like a Russian boarding school, and there's a lot of like kids who are like the daughters of Russian oligarchs, and there's like this weird thing going on where they all have eating disorders, and it's supposed to be like really funny and dark, but for me, I just felt that it was hard. First, I don't even have an eating disorder, and it was really difficult to read and like be in a good mental health state. And I also don't think that it dealt with the subject matter very well. So I think that it didn't have a sensitive look at an eating disorder. It made me feel bad and I didn't get anything out of it. So that was the worst book I read in January. The worst book I read in February was Nightwood. Now this is a classic modernist text. I had to read it for a class on feminist fictions, and I just don't like modernism, and it has this whole section where a man is talking. I think he's like a doctor, and he just talks and talks and talks for about 40 pages, and it's just nonsense and you don't care. And the whole point is that you just like don't care, and you're like, wow, this character can just talk, and it makes me bored because it's supposed to kind of represent like, I think just men in general who won't stop talking and how they make like women feel bored. And like I get it, and like art and whatever making you feel it, but I just like don't come to books to be bored for 40 pages, even if that's like trying to make a point, because I come for entertainment. Did not enjoy that one. Next up in March, this is maybe a hot take, but it was The Two Towers by Tolkien, I don't know, I'm not even saying it right. And yeah, it's not because I hated these books. I think it gave it a solid 3 stars. It's just that March was a really good reading month for me. And that's why this is kind of fun, because some of these books are by far like the worst books I read all year, and some of them aren't. It just so happens like they were kind of meh in a month that I like had a bunch of rock stars. And so that's what's happening here. I read the entire trilogy, I think, in this month, and I just think that this was the weakest of them. I think it suffers a little bit from Frodo and Sam's long journey, and that aspect of it gets a little boring. And I know that's kind of like his shtick, the author's shtick, is that you're along for the ride. And I just felt like it was a little didactic, but I was enjoying watching the movies with my boyfriend once I finished each book. So I don't have anything against The Lord of the Rings. It just, this was a meh book amongst a really good lineup in March. Then in April, this is maybe another controversial pick, but my least favorite book in April was Moby Dick. Now, I read this just because I have 10 books that I want to read in the decade 2020. They're all classics, and Moby Dick is one of them. And so I got it from a used bookstore, and I said, why the heck not? Let's do it. I was reading it in like little chunks every single day while reading other books. And like, I'm glad I read it. I understand why it's a classic. I just by no means find it all that interesting or good. I do think it's interesting knowing sort of Melville's possible queer history and how kind of queer this book is if you read between the lines. I do find that interesting. I just didn't care that much. I mean, there's really barely any women, and once you get past the first little bit where they're on land, like there's just no women. And so as a woman, it's just kind of boring to read a book that has literally no women in it. Nothing against it, it was just not my favorite. It's not a classic that I will be looking for fancy versions of, because I read it, I checked it off. It would have been nice to maybe have a class on it, so I would have appreciated it more, but it is what it is. Next up in May, the worst book I read was The Marriage Plot. Now, this is so sad because this had everything to be a really good book for me. The main character, the girl, is an English major, and you know, she's really interested specifically in like marriage plot novels, and like I studied Victorian literature at Harvard, so I'm like, yep, give it to me, I love this. And this is a love triangle, and God, it was bad. It was bad. I think the author suffers a lot from the way he talks about women's boobs. You know what I'm saying? When there's the men where they're like, her boobs were staring straight at me, and you're like, they weren't. That's just how her boobs were sitting at that moment. Like, they have no agency. They have no agency. I found both of the men to be completely annoying. I didn't want her to end up with either of them. And I just didn't find it particularly good, interesting. It was kind of painful to read. However, I do think the ending kind of redeemed itself. I remember feeling like the last 2 or 3 pages really smacked me in the face, and this kept this from being just an absolute dud of a book. But I still didn't love it. Next up in June, we have one that I can rant about for ages, and that is The Testaments. Now, the reason I can rant about this for ages is because, first of all, no one asked for this. You know, I don't love The Handmaid's Tale, but at least I understand its like place in literature as an early dystopian. I appreciate the connections to Harvard. This is just like a YA thriller that's not even done particularly well. I mean, it's not even like a creme de la creme YA thriller. It is like garbage. It tonally does not match The Handmaid's Tale whatsoever, and it's completely predictable. Like on page 10, I was like, well, here's a twist, and here's a twist, and here's a twist. And then on page 200, I was like, there's that twist. And then on like page 300, I was like, there's that twist. And then at the end, I was like, and there's that twist. And I think one of the interesting things about The Handmaid's Tale is at the end, there's sort of this like speech, and it's this archivist talking about back in time when this whole Gilead thing happened, and you get sort of the idea of how people are learning about this history. And then this book does the same like twist at the end where it's like, and here's like archivists talking about this stuff that they found. And I'm like, you can't do it twice. Like, you already did that. It's not well written, it's not particularly interesting, and you can clock all the twists immediately, and it's bad. And the fact that this won the Booker and had to share it with Girl, Woman, Other, which, you know, spoiler alert, is my favorite book in this month, makes me so mad. Like, Margaret Atwood needed another Booker, first of all, and it's not even good. It shouldn't have been nominated. It's not good. So the fact that it had to share with an actual piece of literature is astonishing to me. It angers me to no end. Okay, I can't even talk about it anymore. I'm getting mad. Next up is Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. Now, who signed off on that book? It is literally Hillary Clinton fan fiction, but like, the whole idea is, what if Hillary didn't marry Bill? Which is so weird to me because Hillary did marry Bill and Hillary is married to Bill and they're both alive. So like, this is this weird concept to me because it got published and like, what does Hillary do? She just reads about it? Like, weird. And it's gross. There's a lot of Hillary Bill sex scenes and they're described in a way that's honestly the worst possible way. I've blocked it out, but it uses some like terminology that I'm like, oh, like she really should have read like actual steamy romance scenes because this is not it. It, like, even if it had been 2 fictional characters, I would have been absolutely horrified. There's a scene where Bill Clinton like plays with the saxophone naked. Like, why? I didn't come here for this. It also like touches on some like different first wave-esque feminism things that Hillary does, like that's not so great for like Black or communities of color. So just like things where she wasn't really great on the race front because she was so busy being good on the like gender front, which of course, you know, intersectionality, but whatever. And it touches on how she did that, but like doesn't excuse it, doesn't explain it, doesn't try to be like, I regret that or I should have done better. It's just like, haha, that happened. And you're like, yeah, it did. What are you gonna say about it? And it was poorly written too, on top of all of that. It was so bad. I don't regret reading it fully because it was really fun to buddy hate read with my friend and we were just horrified the whole time. So there was that. Next up is A Paragon, and this is also longlisted for the Booker. It's by Colin McCann, and it is about an Israeli family and a Pakistani family, both of whom have lost a child in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. One, I think, due to a suicide bomber, and the other one, I think maybe got shot with a rubber bullet and died. And basically it's about these 2 families kind of coming together and realizing they like need to bring peace to the Middle East because both sides are dying, even though both of them originally kind of harbor animosity to the other side. It's also told in this like 1001 Nights way. So there's literally 1,000 chapters, like literally 1,000 chapters. And it's really repetitive, and there's nothing more annoying than an audiobook where, because they have to have that many chapters, like it's only 16 hours. So like every few minutes it's like 567 and you're like, oh, stop. So much of my time was spent just listening to numbers being read out. It was also really repetitive and super didactic, and it really quickly lost any touching aspect because it kept reiterating over and over again the horror of what happened. And I think that's supposed to do something like beneficial, but instead it just made me so bored, and I was like, this is sad. This is a terrible real conflict, and I can't be arsed because this writing is so boring. I just don't think this is a well-written book. Just because you write about a touching topic doesn't mean your book inherently is any good. And just because you have a didactic thing that is something I can get behind doesn't mean your book is any good. In September, the book that I liked the least was Stardaughter. I've already talked about this in another video, but Stardaughter is a book about a girl who is half star. Her mother is a full star and had returned to the sky when she was a child. Now she's a teenager and she's getting kind of called to the sky, and she goes and there's a competition, and her dad is hurt, and basically her grandmother says, you enter this competition for our family, and if you win it, I will help save your dad, which I think is horseshit, because I'm like, you're the grandma, you have the power to save the dad. How come you're like forcing your granddaughter to win the competition for you in order to save her father? And we never addressed how that was like kind of the worst. And then we had this weird competition where the rules didn't make sense. I also hated the romance in this. I did not find the two people all that compatible. It's really a shame because this book had the opportunity to have really cool world building, and it did, but then it built up a lot of the world that didn't matter in terms of plot, which I really enjoyed, but a lot of the stuff that did matter to the plot I thought was really gimmicky, or it just came out of nowhere and was like, well, good news, we have this magic to save the day. And I just don't appreciate when books kind of pull magic out of their butts to save the day. So this was a real disappointment, which is a shame because this book is beautiful with these like purple edges and the shiny cover, but it is what it is. In October, my least favorite book was A Song Below Water, which is another real disappointment. This one just lacked a lot of world building. It's about two sisters, one of whom is a siren, and it just, I saw the twist coming. I didn't think the world building was particularly good. It wasn't fleshed out enough, so I didn't know what was going on. And there's supposed to be these two like sisters who are so close and whatever, and the whole time they just kept secrets from one another that if they had told each other, things could have gone smoother sooner. So I just like wasn't buying into it, and it's a real shame because it does have a really prevalent Black cast, and it talks a lot about like Black hair, and I think that's really important, but the actual fantasy aspect and the plot was just terribly paced, and the world like didn't do anything, and I feel bad, but also this is a book that like across the board people have been like, this missed the mark. Okay, in November is Midnight Sun. I don't even know that I have to go into it, but 26 hours of audiobook for the same damn plot, just making me hate Edward more and making me confused on why Bella seems so terrible in the first one. I don't even have to say much about it, but Midnight Sun was not it. Was not it. Okay, and then for December, my least favorite book in December was Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I just thought that this suffered a lot from having a really boring main character that I just couldn't understand, couldn't get behind. And then on top of that, I felt like I didn't care about the final reveal just because the pacing was kind of boring and slow. And I literally did not care like what the heck this whole Area X was, which is a bad sign. It's a bad sign if your whole big shenanigans is not something people care about. Yeah, and it was 6 hours on audiobook, and that felt too long to me, which again is not a good sign. So that was definitely my least favorite, although I didn't read that many bad books, so I didn't hate it. I gave it 3 stars, but that's that. Look out for my more uplifting video. That will be the best books I read in each month. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.